Hello, I'm Josh Symons, the Strategic Industry Principal at MRI Software in the APAC region. I've been with MRI for just over 4 years and have a total of 15 years experience in the property management industry in Australia. Later on in this session, I'll be introducing Greg Clancy to you, who is our Senior Director for Product Development here in the APAC region. So what will we cover today? Some really important market trends that we have seen, and obviously these have been derived and driven out of the pandemic that has occurred over the last 12 months. A couple of the other insights that are top of mind for agencies, which we've derived through our client advisory board. We'll cover off some PropTech trends for you, which is where Greg will give some great insight, and then some key takeaways and next steps for you as well. So exactly what market trends are impacting us today? Over the last 12 months, there is no doubt that the industry has struggled to understand what moves to make due to the dynamic changes in the market driven by the pandemic. We have seen what we would refer to in many instances as a two-speed market, where you've got very different outcomes coming from houses versus apartments. You've got rental rates and vacancies in different areas across the country, and even in sub-pockets of areas performing dramatically differently. What does that mean? So, over the last year, as we know, we've had a change from traditional going to the office 5 days a week to people spending significant time in their houses, people spending significant time at home, working, and also looking to do recreational activities at home. This has meant that people have looked for more space. Houses naturally lend themselves to these type of concepts and ideas. We've also had the impact of expats returning from overseas, and probably houses that were once rented out in the market, these expats are now returning to. And then we've obviously seen the change in demand for apartments. Apartments, the data clearly shows, have had a lackluster performance over the last 12 months. That only isn't due to the fact that we've had this change in people's needs in the house, but also to the fact that we've had international border closures, we've had business travel almost grind to a halt, and we've had international students, as a result of those international border closures, desert our country. To give you an idea of what we mean about this concept, we looked at some data specifically in areas such as Melbourne CBD and areas like the south of Sydney CBD in Chippendale. Chippendale as a suburb is anchored by 2 universities, and at the southern end of the CBD from a business perspective. Chippendale as a suburb has had significant impact in that rental rates have decreased on average by $156 per week. That lends itself to an equation of almost a 30% reduction in rental return for a landlord at the top line. Naturally, vacancies in these suburbs have also catapulted to a level that we never expected to see in our lifetime. We were talking double digits, almost well over 20% at a vacancy rate. That market and that suburb in particular is still sitting at a very high vacancy rate and still has a declining rent month on month over the last 14 months. If we then look at areas such as Penrith to the west of Sydney, or even if we look at a total geographical area like Perth, we've seen the vacancy rate go to sub 4%, and we've seen rental rates increase. What does that mean and how has that happened? It lends itself back to this two-speed market approach. Throughout the pandemic, people made decisions to move further out. Obviously, there was some, concern about stability of income, which drove people to look for cheaper accommodation further out from the city. This concept also ties itself into regional growth, which is the second point that we want to talk about today. Against the metro decline, regional areas performed very, very well. We know that people made lifestyle changes due to the fact that they could work from home full time, something that was not even thought of over 15 months ago. We had an idea that we could move out there and have this lifestyle as well as balance our work. What we are seeing today, however, is that as the pandemic has passed, as an economic recovery has probably happened in our country particularly a little bit better than anyone expected, as employers look to get people back to offices for more collaboration, we're seeing that there is a trend of people moving from those regional areas back into city centres. That could mean that that two-speed market that we referred to earlier starts to come off, and that we see demand for apartments increase because rental returns or weekly rents are lower than what they were previously. So people have the ability to afford getting a 2-bedroom apartment closer to the city when previously they maybe could only afford a 1-bedroom apartment, which also will trend our vacancy rates downwards. The third point is the volatile economy. So I've spoken to this point in the prior 2 points earlier, but the volatile economy, the impact of job seeker and job keeper had a significant impact on the rental market. We know that it provided us what we would call a safety net to many landlords, as well as tenants, to make sure that they could continue to pay their rent and they had some form of income. What we're seeing, however, now is as we come out of the pandemic, we're certainly seeing a recovery. That volatile economy is starting to come off, as we know, but we haven't seen the full impact of what will happen now that only approximately 30 days ago, rental moratoriums in most legislative bodies across Australia came to an end, which meant that property management businesses could go back to that idea of reinforcing rental payments needing to be made on time and then handling those matters, if they are not happening, in a more conducive way for the property management business and the landlord. The fourth point, which has happened amongst all of this over the last 12 months, is compliance. We know that there has been significant legislation change across many of our states and territories over the last number of years, as well as over in New Zealand, which pioneered the way with the Healthy Homes Bill. What we've seen as at this year, which actually was delayed from an implementation from the Victorian government last year, is a change to the way compliance, or property compliance specifically, needs to be handled in the state of Victoria. And what does this mean? There is now an onus on a landlord to comply with multiple parts of the Act to state that a property is fit for a tenant to live in, that it doesn't have things like rising damp, that it doesn't suffer from things like mould. And if that property isn't to that standard, the landlord needs to take action to make sure that it gets to that standard. This will have a significant impact not only on property management businesses in that state to make sure that they are complying with the Act and that their landlords are complying with the Act. It will also have a significant impact on supply and demand. We have a bill that was designed to make tenants, designed for tenants to have that reassurance that properties are up to a certain standard so that the weekly rent that they're paying is, correct and in order for what they're receiving. What that could do, however, is tie back to a couple of the earlier points, and we're yet to see this play out, which is landlords that cannot afford to fix those houses, that cannot afford for that property to be compliant, will be forced to sell. And exactly what that will do to supply and demand, we're yet to see. And naturally, as we know, supply and demand are directly related to weekly rents, vacancy rates, and all of those type of things. The fifth point that the market trends that are impacting us today is obviously technology. COVID has transformed technology, and the acceleration rate to digitise everything came at everyone like a freight train almost overnight. Every single one of our customers, if we turn the dial back just over 12 months, had to go from walking into an office every day, having every piece of infrastructure at their hands, to having a totally dispersed workforce working from home, and it needed technology to support that theory and that idea. The other piece that has really come to the forefront for our customers and the property management industry at large is the business model in which they have been operating. And when we refer to business model, we're talking commercial and financial model. So as we know, the existing property management business generates income primarily out of a percentage of rent collected on each of the houses. And if we just go back a couple of points, we spoke about vacancy rates being at 20%. We spoke of the need to go through and adjust rents. We spoke of the need for property managers to be working more than they ever have, and ultimately they were working for less, because as rents decreased, as vacancy rates rised, property management businesses were collecting less revenue. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the industry, I believe, has come to a realisation, and certainly across the customers that I have interactions with, that we need to change that model moving forward. We need to have some ideas about how we get out of having our revenue connected to a percentage of rent collected and be rewarding for the work that we do. So what is top of mind for agencies in the industry? Earlier this year, MRI launched our inaugural MRI Living Client Advisory Board. One of the objectives was to bring together 20 industry leaders that represent tens of thousands of properties across Australia and New Zealand to better understand the trends and challenges impacting the real estate industry. During the inaugural meeting, there were many key points of discussion, as you can see in this visual representation from all the themes highlighted during the half-day meeting. But what most of the client advisory board members agreed centred on 3 key points. The first point was education of landlords. Over the last 12 months, property managers have found themselves in a position where they've had to have conversations that they have never had to have in their career about taking rents back by $150 a week, about tenants that could no longer pay rent for prolonged periods of time, and obviously phoning a landlord who particularly, could be impacted by that financial decision was hard. The ability for us to educate property managers so they can have those robust conversations with landlords with actual data and insights is a huge piece that came out of the conversation. Consistency of income. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key market trends we're seeing is this idea of the business model and the need to change the business model and evolve the business model. Managing both top and bottom revenue lines as well as diversifying income streams. And the third point, which I also spoke of earlier, was around technology. As we know, technology is an enabler of business models, but customer experience remained paramount throughout the pandemic. Over the last 12 months, people have expected more from our property managers and expected it in faster times than they've ever had before due to the fact that they were at home, under financial pressure and stress as well. So as we dig a little bit deeper into these 3 themes, so education being key for landlords, data insights and shared data back to our customers is certainly something that has come out of the conversation that we see as an area that MRI can add value. So how do we go about arming property managers with the correct data to have the conversation so that they can have a meaningful impact on their landlord's investment as well as on the tenant's life? This whole piece of education of landlords is available to us due to the fact of the technology world that we live in today, due to the fact that we have data that supports these trends, and by providing those trends and data back to property managers, they're having real conversations with landlords, with tenants about why something needs to be like it is. It's not an assumption based on what could happen, what has happened, or what might happen, which we know has traditionally been the way in the past. By having a conversation with key data points that are actuals, that represent the market and the sub-market that the landlord owns a property in is absolutely key moving forward. The business model. Business models and the property management business are an absolute passion of mine because the existing business model, as I mentioned before, is a percentage of rent collected. We know that back in 1980, many people got in their car, drove around to every tenant, collected rent by cash. They did that drive every Saturday, and that's how the business model that we have today came about ultimately. We know that so much has evolved since then. Technology has evolved dramatically. Expectations of landlords has evolved dramatically. The ability to have data, as we've spoken about, at our fingertips is now a thing that we can have instantly and on demand. We know that the idea of the tenant wanting a better level of service, a better quality of property is something. Yet this business model has not evolved and has not changed. Don't get me wrong, there's many businesses in our industry that have absolutely evolved to diversify income streams, to add investment management services to their industry. But still at the core, our core revenue as a property management industry is derived from a very old fee model, which is percentage of rent. If we go back, as I said, over the last 14 months, and we have a look at the time spent by property managers renegotiating rents, showing properties that were vacant probably 10 or 15 times more than they would have in the past, having a vacancy list of 150 properties, we're still collecting the same level of income and doing 3 to 4 times the amount of work. The client advisory board was quite interesting because during that conversation, this was a very topical piece that came up, and naturally everyone had very strong views on what this meant for their business. And when we hear businesses saying that their income and their P&L effectively has gone back 10 years over the space of the last 8 months, we know that this is something that needs a very clear focus and is top of mind for agencies. The third point that I want to cover off and dig into a little bit deeper is the rise of digital. As I said, technology is an enabler of business outcomes. It is not the end solution in itself. The idea of making technology work for your business is absolutely critical and important to your success and growth in the future. Technology in itself, as I said, won't give you that outcome, but it's important to use that technology to drive that customer experience. Customer experience remains one of the most topical terms, CX, EX, as we know over the last 3 to 4 years, have become points that we've heard people speak about ad nauseum. But what does it actually mean, and how do you actually use technology to help deliver that better customer experience is absolutely critical. There is no doubt that the pace and degree of transformation has dramatically accelerated in the wake of the pandemic, and we don't see that slowing down and stopping. So how do you balance tech fatigue by property managers and the increasing demands of customers, being your tenants and your landlords, and even trade creditors, is absolutely critical to get right moving forward. The pace and degree of digital transformation dramatically accelerated in the wake of the pandemic. The word PropTech has come up time and time again and has only increased further over the last 12 months. I would like to introduce to you Greg Clancy. Greg is our head of product in the APAC region, and Greg's going to help us talk about PropTech trends that we're seeing in the residential and strata management industry in the APAC region. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Josh. Glad to be here.
So you've recently joined MRI, and did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm thrilled to have joined MRI in the PropTech market about 3 months ago to head up the product team here in Asia Pacific. And what's so exciting for me is that PropTech is really at the forefront of the global digital transformation, and MRI is definitely well positioned as a leader in this space. So I've built my career of creating and scaling market-leading software products, and so I'm excited to bring that same level of innovation and customer focus to our APAC customers.
So something I do know about you, Greg, is that you have a master's in artificial intelligence. Is that right?
Yeah, so I did actually live in Paris for 3 years and went to the University of Paris and did a Master of Artificial Intelligence. And what's really key about that is this concept of data, which is so critical, and you spoke about earlier. And it's data in terms of, how do I find the data in terms of all the different devices or Internet of Things or people, and bring that together so people can sort of make fast decisions, make better decisions, and how do we actually use the data to actually make them more productive and effective in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, we know that there is mountains of data in property management businesses. There's no shortage of data. It's more so how we, as a business, help people transform that data into usable insights, which I think is where, from what I'm hearing, AI really plays a critical part.
Right, and I'd say the beauty here is, it impacts things like chatbots for improved self-service, machine learning to really capture and extrapolate on those insights that we can deliver, natural language processing so we can actually make a more informed experience for our users and for our customers.
Yeah, and how do you see AI playing a place in the strata industry? I mean, we've spoken about property management, but how do you see it translating into the strata industry as well?
And again, a lot of what we do across these industries is really this concept of connected communities, both on the property and the strata management side. So how do we create an experience and leverage the information, whether I'm a tenant or an owner or a landlord or a building owner or a strata manager, and really figure out how do we actually connect those threads across all those different audiences. And that really introduces into another key trend, which I think is this concept of experience.
Yep. So we know that, experience, as we said earlier, I said earlier in this conversation, there has been an abundance of people expecting better service. We know that CX has been a buzzword for a number of years now, but the pandemic, due to people being at home, being under stress, really expected more from property managers. And obviously that experience was not able to change. In fact, it's accelerated. How do you see PropTech playing a role in helping deliver a better customer experience, whether it's tenant, landlord, creditor, lot owner, or strata manager or property manager themselves?
Yeah, and experience for me, it's one of my personal passions. So it's an area that I've certainly invested in myself and as part of my own learning and growth throughout my career. And so if we think about experience, it's not just look and feel or colours of screen. It's truly about how do we actually make it easy to get your job done. So I think as we talk about, particularly with COVID, it really accelerated this concept of what I'll call the digital workplace. So it's no longer a physical place I go. It's like, how do I pull those threads together in terms of, the activities that I have to do, the tasks that I'm working on, the workflow of the jobs to be done, etc., and pull that, the communications and collaboration, because I think that's another really large transformation that we've seen is, how do we help these people and teams collaborate more effectively? And so pull this together in terms of this, cohesive digital workplace. And I think that's really going to sort of empower both strata managers and property managers. And that also then in fact allows us to talk about this concept of connected communities, which is how do I get the right information at the right time to our tenants, to our residents, to the lot owners, so they can be informed and understand what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, you spoke about the digital workspace. We know that, particularly over the last 12 months, but even traditionally, property managers and strata managers are often out in the field. They're often running meetings at a building. They're often seeing a landlord at a house for an appraisal or talking about their next investment. How do you see mobility tying all this together?
Yeah, and I think that's a core trend that we've seen globally is this concept of, mobile first. So we always have to assume that, whether it's from an iPad or my iPhones or some other mobile device, people are always on the move. And, and that's even more important with COVID where, a lot of people haven't been able to sort of be locked down in an office or go to meet. They need to actually take their work with them. And so mobility is always going to be a critical part of that. And we can see that through the use of, better apps for both the consumers of our software as well as, for the managers either of a strata or a property side.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything that you want to leave with from a PropTech trends perspective, Greg, for the audience, for our property managers and strata managers out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think in particular, it's all about, how can we help you be more effective every single day and really be part of your overarching success. So, we are part of that, and we think every single day when we come to work, how can we enable the success of both our strata managers and property managers?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we finish up, I'd just like to leave you with a few key takeaways. First and foremost, we spoke of the changing business model. So what does that mean for the industry and how do we get there? This is going to be an evolving conversation. We're looking to change what has been decades worth of the way a property management business has run and how we evolve that to deliver better customer service, but also to keep our customers and their businesses in a very healthy and financial state to help them to continue to grow. The other point that I'd like to leave you with is around data. Data and data insights. We spoke about the need to arm property managers and strata managers with the right data points that are live, that are current, that are specific to their regions so that they can have better conversations with their landlords. And then the third and final point is around technology. We just heard from Greg some really cool ideas about technology. Here at MRI, it is obviously our idea to help technology be a business enabler for you. So we will look to continue to evolve our suite of solutions to help you produce better outcomes for your landlords, better outcomes for your tenants, and also, most importantly, make sure that property managers have all the tools they need to succeed and do their jobs well.